I'm running away from my pro-Trump Christian family to be with the woman I love. I'm 19, raised in a tiny religious town in the Deep South. Homeschooled, sheltered, taught my godly duty was to marry a man and have children. At 14, I realized I liked girls and cried myself to sleep, terrified of hell. Then I met Bobby. Spring Sunday, allergies acting up during service. Mom sent me outside. Behind the church stood a girl I'd never seen. Dark hair, freckles, cigarette hanging from her mouth, missing front tooth. Still beautiful. I'm Bobby, just moved here. Hate it already. Her parents moved here hoping our religious town would fix her after expulsion. She offered me her cigarette. When I struggled, she laughed, put her hand on my heart. Breathe now, she said. My first crush. We spent summer together. Creeks by day, stargazing at night. One night, we stole a massive firework, triggered car alarms, ran into a barn laughing. In the moonlight, I told her I loved her. She kissed me. We planned to save money, run away together. 2 months later, Mom found my hidden cash. What's this for? College. You've been different. Sneaking out? Is it that Bobby girl? She's my friend. Pastor Williams saw you too. Too close. Mom slapped me. Don't lie. That night, I texted Bobby. They're suspicious. 2 more weeks. Almost free. Sunday, Pastor Williams preached about unnatural desires, staring at me. After service, Bobby wasn't there. Monday, missing. Tuesday, phone disconnected. Wednesday, her father answered their door. Bobby's at a camp for troubled girls. Don't come back. At home, Mom waited with Pastor Williams and 3 elders. You're going to the same camp. You leave tomorrow. That night, I climbed out my window with $300 saved. The camp was 2 towns over, Holy Redemption Youth Facility. Chain link fence, barbed wire. Through the fence, I saw Bobby in gray uniform, head shaved. You have to leave, she said through the fence. This isn't a camp. Kids who graduate don't go home. They get sold. What? I found paperwork, adoption documents, international buyers. They're trafficking us. The police? Sheriff is Pastor Williams's brother. A guard spotted us. Hey, run, Bobby screamed. Find my Uncle Jerome Reed in Atlanta. He's FBI. The guard dragged her away. I hitchhiked to Atlanta, found Jerome Reed at the FBI office, told him everything. We've been investigating similar camps for 3 years, he said. They raided the camp at dawn. Bobby wasn't there, Jerome told me. They moved her after you visited. 6 other girls, too. Where? Shipping manifests show cargo to Eastern Europe. No. We arrested your mother. She was getting paid $50,000 per girl. Been recruiting for years. How many? At least 12 from your town, including your sister. I don't have a sister. He showed me a photo, a girl looking exactly like me, but younger. Rebecca. Your mother had her when you were 2, said she died, sold her instead. The room spun. There's more. Bobby's real name is Roberta Williams, Pastor Williams's daughter. He reported her as runaway 2 years ago, collected insurance. She escaped once before. My phone buzzed. Video message. Bobby, bruised in a shipping container. Stop talking to the FBI, a voice said off camera, or you'll never see her again. Jerome grabbed the phone. Let me trace this. Another message arrived. Photos. My house. My mother's mugshot. Then a document that made my blood freeze. My birth certificate. But the name wasn't mine. What is this? I asked Jerome. He studied it. This is... You're listed as deceased. Died at 3 months old. What? The girl your mother raised as her daughter. You're not her. According to this, you're Rebecca Carter. Kidnapped from a hospital in Georgia 19 years ago. Another text. We've been watching you since birth. You were never supposed to find each other. Bobby knows who you really are. That's why we can't let her talk. Jerome's phone rang. He answered, went pale. They found the container, empty. But there was blood. And this. He showed me a photo, written in what looked like blood on the container wall. She's not the first Rebecca. Another text arrived. This time, a voice message. Bobby's voice, but wrong somehow. There are dozens of us, all named Rebecca. All look the same. We're not kidnapped. The message cut off. Jerome stared at me. When did you say your mother had your sister? When I was 2. And you're 19 now? Yes. He pulled up a database, started typing frantically. Oh my God. There are 17 missing girls named Rebecca in surrounding states. All reported dead as infants. All born within 2 years of each other. All to mothers in the same fertility clinic. What are you saying? I don't think you were kidnapped. I think you were created. All of you. My phone rang. Mom calling from jail. I answered. Hello, Rebecca 7, she said. I can't move. My mother's voice keeps playing in my head like a broken record, those 3 words hitting me over and over. Rebecca 7. 7. That means there are 6 others, maybe more, all with my face. Jerome is typing so fast his fingers blur across the keyboard, pulling up files and databases while I just stand here frozen. The FBI office feels too small suddenly, walls closing in, air getting thick. My phone is still in my hand, Mom's number glowing on the screen, and I want to throw it across the room, but my fingers won't work right. Jerome stops typing and turns his monitor toward me. 6 photos fill the screen, 6 girls who could be my twin, all staring back at me from what looks like hospital records. They're babies in most of the pictures, wrapped in those standard hospital blankets, but the faces are identical. Same eyes, same nose, same everything. Each photo has a different name underneath, though. Rebecca Carter, Rebecca Vega, Rebecca Liu, Rebecca O'Brien, Rebecca Kowalski, Rebecca Rao. All reported dead between 17 and 19 years ago, according to the dates stamped on the files. Different last names, different families, different states, but the same face repeated 6 times, plus mine makes 7. My legs give out and I drop into the chair next to Jerome's desk. He's already pulling up more information, birth certificates and death certificates that don't make sense because how can you be born and die and somehow still be alive 19 years later? I grab his arm and my voice comes out shaky but loud. I need to see the fertility clinic records right now, everything they have, because this is bigger than just trafficking. Jerome nods and picks up his phone, already dialing someone about a warrant, explaining we need it immediately. A woman walks into the office area, badge clipped to her belt, dark hair pulled back tight. Jerome waves her over and introduces her as Faith, FBI forensic analyst who specializes in digital tracking. Faith sits down at the computer next to Jerome and starts pulling up the video message that came to my phone earlier, the one showing Bobby beaten and scared in that container. Her fingers move across the keyboard, pulling apart the message, tracing where it came from, following digital trails I don't understand. She mutters something about encrypted servers and proxy chains while Jerome keeps arguing with whoever's on the phone about the warrant. I watch Faith work, watch lines of code scroll across her screen, watch her face get more serious as she finds something. The video was sent through a server in Romania, she tells us without looking away from the monitor. That matches the shipping records Jerome found earlier, the ones showing cargo heading to Eastern Europe. Faith keeps typing, following the communication patterns back through the network, trying to find other members and hopefully Bobby's location. My phone buzzes again and I almost drop it, terrified of what message might come next. But it's just a spam call. Jerome hangs up and grabs his jacket off the back of his chair. The warrant got approved, he says. Some judge he knows who understood the immediate danger to Bobby and the other missing girls. We're going to the clinic right now, full tactical team, and he tells me I should stay here where it's safe. I stand up and tell him absolutely not. I'm coming with them. Jerome starts to argue, but something in my face makes him stop. He hands me a vest from a locker in the corner, bulletproof and heavy, and tells me to stay behind the agents at all times. We pile into black SUVs in the parking garage, 6 vehicles full of armed FBI agents who look like they do this every day. The clinic is 40 minutes away, and Jerome spends the drive briefing everyone on what we might find, showing them the files on his tablet, explaining about the 17 Rebeccas and the trafficking network. Dawn breaks as we pull up to the clinic, pink and orange light spreading across a clean modern building that looks completely normal. White walls, big windows, landscaped bushes, a sign out front advertising fertility treatments and family planning services. The parking lot is empty this early, just a few cars that probably belong to night staff. It looks so ordinary, so safe, and that makes everything worse somehow because horrible things happened inside that normal building. The tactical team moves fast, surrounding all the exits before the lead agent gives the signal. Agents swarm through the front doors and I follow behind Jerome, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. Inside is a typical medical office with a reception desk and waiting room chairs and magazines on a coffee table. An older man in a white coat comes running from a back hallway, heading for the rear exit, but 2 agents tackle him before he makes it 10 feet. Dr. Hodges, Jerome says, and the man stops struggling. Agents spread through the building, clearing rooms, and Jerome leads me downstairs to the basement. The stairs are concrete and the air gets colder as we go down. At the bottom is a locked door that an agent breaks open with one kick. Inside is a records room packed with filing cabinets, the old metal kind with drawers that stick. Jerome starts pulling files while other agents photograph everything. I open the nearest cabinet and find folders organized by year, each one stuffed with documents about genetic engineering and embryo creation. The files go back 20 years, showing detailed plans for creating identical embryos using experimental cloning methods that probably weren't legal. One file shows diagrams of how they split a single donor egg 17 ways, creating 17 identical genetic copies. My hands shake as I flip through page after page of scientific documentation, proving that I was made in a lab, designed and manufactured like a product. I find my file in a cabinet labeled Placements. Rebecca 7, it says across the top in neat handwriting. Placement with Crawford family, Southern Baptist community, high compliance probability. The file lists mom's name, our address, details about the religious town where I grew up. Each Rebecca has a similar file, and I pull them out one by one, reading about how we were placed with specific families. The families were chosen carefully, Jerome realizes as he reads over my shoulder. Religious extremists, financially desperate, isolated communities, all the factors that would make recruitment easier later. We weren't just created, we were placed like chess pieces in a game we didn't know we were playing. More files reveal that Dr. Hodges partnered with pastor and a whole network of religious leaders across the South. They created us to be trafficking victims, engineering specific genetic markers that made us valuable to certain buyers overseas. The files use cold scientific language about product specifications and market demands that make me want to throw up. Jerome finds shipping records in another cabinet, pages and pages of transactions going back 5 years. 12 Rebeccas already trafficked, he says, his voice tight with anger. 5 currently in the network, including Bobby. The first 6, Rebecca 1 through Rebecca 6, are listed as complete transactions with dates and locations. Complete transactions. That phrase sits in my stomach like poison because I know what it means. What happened to those first 6 girls who shared my face? Faith pulls the laptop closer and starts typing fast, her fingers moving across the keyboard like she's done this 1,000 times before. Jerome stands behind her watching the screen while I try to process everything we just found in those filing cabinets. The files are still spread across the table, my face staring up at me from 17 different folders. Faith opens a program that looks complicated, lots of numbers and codes scrolling down the screen. She explains she's accessing the clinic's email server using the passwords we found in the desk upstairs. The first few emails are normal medical stuff, appointment reminders and insurance questions. But then she finds a folder labeled Distribution Network that makes my stomach drop. She clicks it open and hundreds of messages appear, all sent between accounts with fake names like Shepherd23 and Harvest_Cord. Jerome leans closer to read over her shoulder. The first email Faith opens is from someone called Product_Manager to Shepherd23, talking about Rebecca 4 being ready for transport. The next one discusses delivery schedules for 3 units to Bucharest, with expected arrival dates and payment amounts. They're talking about people like where packages being shipped. Faith keeps scrolling and finds messages between someone named Michael Carlson and multiple other accounts coordinating pickups across 5 states. One email has a spreadsheet attached showing names, ages, and something called compliance scores for each girl. Rebecca 7, that's me, has a score of 87, which apparently means high value, minimal resistance expected. I feel sick reading it. Jerome pulls out his phone and makes a call to someone at the FBI office, telling them to put out an arrest warrant for Michael Carlson immediately. Faith finds more emails going back 3 years showing the whole operation, how they moved girls through different facilities before sending them overseas, how they used religious camps as holding areas because no one questions those places. The messages talk about product quality and delivery efficiency, like we're furniture they're selling. One email from 6 months ago discusses how Rebecca 1 through 6 were successfully placed with international clients and payment was received in full. Jerome has to walk away from the table and I hear him punch the wall in the hallway. I end up in a conference room at the FBI office surrounded by photos of 17 girls who all have my face. Jerome arranged them on a big board, organizing them by number from Rebecca 1 to Rebecca 17. Some photos are recent, showing girls around my age smiling at birthday parties or school events. Some are older baby pictures from when we were all placed with our families. 5 spots have no recent photos at all, just the words, missing, last seen, with dates. Rebecca 1 disappeared 4 years ago. Rebecca 6 vanished 2 years back. 3 others, including Bobby, went missing in the last 6 months. I sit at the table staring at the board trying to understand that these are real people, not just copies of me, but actual girls with their own lives and families who hurt them. Jerome comes in with coffee and sits across from me. He tells me they're working on locating the other 12 Rebeccas right now, the ones who weren't trafficked yet, to make sure they're safe. Faith is checking birth records and current addresses for all of them. Some are still living with the families who raised them, completely unaware they were created in a lab and placed like chess pieces. I ask Jerome what happens to them when they find out the truth, and he says they'll need therapy and support just like me. He shows me files on each Rebecca, information they gathered from public records and social media. Rebecca 3 lives in Tennessee and just started college. Rebecca 9 is in Alabama working at a grocery store. Rebecca 14 is only 16 and still in high school. They all look so normal in their photos, living regular lives while this nightmare waits to swallow them. The phone on the conference table rings and Jerome answers it, then puts it on speaker. A woman's voice comes through, shaky and scared, asking if this is the FBI tip line about the fertility clinic case. Jerome confirms it and asks who she is. The woman says her name is Esther Bates, and she saw the news coverage about the raid this morning. She says she thinks she might be one of the Rebeccas. Jerome looks at me, and I feel my hands start shaking. He asks Esther which Rebecca she is, and she says the camp paperwork called her Rebecca 12. She's in Texas now, been there for 3 years since she escaped from a place called Shepherd's Grace Youth Ministry. She never reported it because the people who ran the camp threatened to kill her family if she talked. Jerome asks if she's safe right now, and she says yes. She's been living under a different name with her aunt who doesn't know the whole story. He tells her they need her to come to Atlanta to give a statement, and she starts crying, saying she's been so scared for so long and didn't know who to trust. Jerome promises her they'll protect her, and explains that finding her alive means there's hope for the others too. He gives her information about witness protection, and tells her an agent will contact her within the hour to arrange safe transport. When the call ends, Jerome updates the board, moving Rebecca 12 from the unknown status section to located and safe. One more face accounted for, but still so many missing. An hour later, I'm sitting in a smaller office talking to Esther on the phone while Jerome handles other parts of the investigation. Her voice sounds exactly like mine, which is so weird I almost drop the phone the first time she speaks. She tells me about the dreams she's been having for years, dreams about other girls who look like her standing in a circle holding hands. She thought she was going crazy, but now she understands it was something deeper, some connection between all of us. I tell her about meeting Bobby and finding out the truth, about the files and the trafficking network. She goes quiet for a long time, and then says she knew something was wrong when she was at Shepherd's Grace, that the whole Reformation thing was fake, and they were really just breaking girls down to make them easier to control. She describes the same gray uniforms, the same head shaving, the same guards watching everyone. She got out by pretending to be compliant for 6 months until they trusted her enough to work in the kitchen. Then she stole a delivery truck's keys and drove 8 hours to her aunt's house in Texas. She's been hiding ever since, working under the table and avoiding anything that might put her name in a system. I ask if she ever saw any of the other Rebeccas at Shepherd's Grace, and she says no, but she heard guards talking about other facilities in different states. She thinks the network kept us separated on purpose so we wouldn't figure out what we were. We talk for almost an hour, and by the end I feel less alone in this nightmare. She says she wants to help find the others, especially the ones who are still trapped. Jerome comes back and tells me they're bringing Esther to Atlanta tomorrow under protection. Jerome introduces me to another FBI agent, a woman named May Gonzalez, who specializes in international trafficking cases. She's older than Jerome, maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that look like they've seen too much bad stuff. She sits down with maps and files spread across the table and explains that rescuing Bobby and the other missing girls isn't going to be simple. The trafficking network operates across multiple countries with connections to organized crime groups in Eastern Europe. If they raid the wrong location or move too fast, the traffickers will just kill the girls and destroy evidence. May shows me satellite images of suspected facilities in Romania and Moldova, buildings that look like warehouses or old factories from the outside. She explains that trafficking victims get moved frequently, sometimes every few days, to keep law enforcement from tracking them. They need to coordinate with police in multiple countries and time everything perfectly. She tells me that even with Dr. Hodges cooperating and giving them information, there's no guarantee they'll find everyone alive. Some girls might have been moved to locations he doesn't know about. Some might have been sold to private buyers who keep them in houses instead of facilities. I ask how long it usually takes to rescue trafficking victims, and she says it depends. Sometimes weeks or months of investigation before they can move. I tell her we don't have months, that Bobby could be dead by then, and May looks at me with sympathy, but also realism. She says rushing in without proper planning gets people killed. Jerome backs her up, saying they need to do this right even though it's hard to wait. May spreads out more detailed maps showing the suspected trafficking routes from the United States to Eastern Europe. She points to cities in Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, where American trafficking victims typically end up. The network usually moves girls through several countries to confuse law enforcement and make jurisdiction complicated. She shows me photos of other rescued victims, girls who don't look like me but have the same dead eyes and haunted expressions. She explains that the buyers who purchase trafficked girls often have specific requests, which is why the Rebecca clones were valuable. Someone wanted identical girls they could collect like a set. The thought makes me want to throw up, but I force myself to keep listening. May says they're working with Interpol and local police in 5 countries right now, sharing information about the network and planning coordinated raids. She shows me surveillance photos of known traffickers, men and women who look completely normal, like people you'd see at a grocery store. That's what makes it so effective, she says. Nobody suspects regular-looking people of doing horrible things. She pulls out a file on Michael Carlson, the coordinator Faith found in the emails. He's been on their radar for 2 years, but they could never get enough evidence to arrest him. Now with the clinic emails, they have him connected to at least 30 trafficking cases. Jerome comes in and tells us they just arrested Michael Carlson at his house in Florida, found shipping records and fake passports in his office. Faith bursts into the room holding her laptop, saying she found another encrypted message that was sent just 2 hours ago. She plays it on the speakers and we hear a computerized voice saying, "Shut down Southern operations immediately. FBI has clinic records. Move all active assets to secondary locations." The message was sent to multiple phone numbers, including one registered to Pastor Williams. Jerome swears and grabs his phone, calling the agents watching the church. They confirm Pastor is still there leading evening service like nothing is wrong. Jerome tells them to move in now and arrest him before he can warn anyone else. Faith traces the message back to the same server in Romania that sent the video of Bobby, which means whoever is running this operation overseas knows we're coming. May says this is bad because if they're moving the girls to new locations right now, we might lose track of them completely. She makes calls to her contacts in Europe, telling them to watch all known facilities for suspicious vehicle activity. Jerome and I drive to the church with a team of agents, arriving just as evening service is ending. People are walking out the front doors singing hymns and hugging each other, completely unaware their pastor is a monster. We wait until most of the congregation leaves before the agents move in. Pastor Williams is in his office counting money from the collection plate when agents kick open the door. He tries to act confused and innocent, asking what this is about and saying they can't just barge into a church. Jerome shows him the warrant and tells him he's under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, racketeering, and about 15 other charges. Pastor starts yelling about religious persecution and his rights, saying this is an attack on Christian values. The agents search his office while he's screaming, finding his phone in a desk drawer. Faith takes it and starts going through the messages right there, reading them out loud. Dozens of texts coordinating trafficking logistics, payments to the camp, instructions for moving specific girls. One message from 3 days ago says, "Rebecca 7 is becoming a problem. Recommend immediate removal." That was about me. Jerome has to physically hold me back from going after Pastor. They take him out in handcuffs while church members stand in the parking lot looking shocked. Some of them start crying and praying. Others look angry like they think we're the bad guys. The sheriff shows up trying to throw his weight around, demanding they release his brother. But Jerome tells him he's next on the arrest list. The sheriff's face goes white and he tries to run back to his car, but agents tackle him before he gets there. At the FBI office, they put Pastor Williams in an interrogation room and Jerome goes in first. I watch through the one-way glass while Faith sits beside me explaining what's happening. Pastor sits there looking smug for the first 20 minutes, refusing to answer questions and demanding his lawyer. Jerome stays calm, laying out photos of all the missing girls on the table, including several pictures of Bobby from when she was younger. That's when Pastor finally cracks. He starts crying, actual tears running down his face, saying Bobby was his daughter and he was trying to save her soul. Jerome slams his hands on the table so hard I jump. He yells that saving someone doesn't involve selling them to traffickers, doesn't involve shaving their heads and locking them in cages. Pastor keeps crying and saying he sent her to the camp to fix her, to make her normal, that he never meant for her to get trafficked. Jerome calls him a liar and shows him the phone messages proving he knew exactly what happened to girls at Holy Redemption. Pastor breaks down completely, admitting he got paid for every girl he sent there, that the money was supposed to help the church, but he needed it for gambling debts. He says Bobby found out about the trafficking 2 years ago when she was 16, that she tried to tell people but nobody believed her because he told everyone she was a troubled runaway. That's when he reported her missing and collected insurance money. Jerome looks like he wants to kill him. Another agent comes in and tells Jerome he needs to step out before he does something that ruins the case. Jerome leaves the room and I can see him in the hallway punching the wall again, his knuckles bleeding. Faith goes through the rest of Pastor's phone while I watch through the glass, reading message after message about moving girls and collecting payments. Jerome comes back with bandages on his knuckles and sits beside me, breathing hard. Another agent brings in more evidence from Pastor's office, including a ledger showing every girl he sent to Holy Redemption over the past 5 years, with dollar amounts next to their names. Bobby's name appears twice, once 2 years ago and again 3 weeks ago, each time with $50,000 written next to it. Jerome sees it and has to leave the room again. Faith finds texts between Pastor and someone named Victor discussing transport routes through Romania and pricing for what they call premium merchandise. The messages talk about Bobby specifically, saying she's high value because she knows too much and needs to be kept overseas permanently. Agents raid the sheriff's house around midnight while I'm still at the FBI office. Jerome gets the call and tells me they found him trying to delete files from his computer, but their tech guy stopped the hard drive wipe in time. They bring the sheriff in wearing pajamas and handcuffs, his face red and sweating. He demands to talk to his lawyer and threatens to sue everyone, but Jerome just shows him the financial records they pulled from his computer. The sheriff's bank account has deposits totaling over $300,000 from accounts traced back to the trafficking network. Faith pulls up missing persons reports filed in his jurisdiction over the past 10 years. 47 cases involving young girls that were never investigated. The sheriff closed each case within days, claiming the girls were runaways or moved away with family. Jerome spreads the reports across the interrogation table and asks the sheriff to explain why he never followed up on any of them. The sheriff stops talking and asks for his lawyer again. Eleanor Herring arrives at the FBI office the next morning wearing a dark suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents. She's maybe 40, with short gray hair and tired eyes that look like they've seen too much. Jerome introduces us, and she shakes my hand, then sits across from me at a conference table. She explains that she's building a RICO case against everyone involved in the trafficking network, which means proving they all work together as a criminal organization. My testimony will be crucial because I can connect the fertility clinic to the religious communities to the trafficking operation. She needs me to walk through everything from the beginning, how I was raised, meeting Bobby, finding out about Holy Redemption, discovering I was Rebecca 7. I tell her everything while she takes notes, stopping me sometimes to ask specific questions about dates and names. She says the trial will probably start in about 6 months, and I'll need to testify for at least 2 days, maybe longer depending on how the defense lawyers question me. I ask what happens to everyone if we win, and she says most of them will get 20 years minimum. Some might get life sentences. I think about Bobby being held somewhere in Romania while we sit here talking about trials that won't happen for months. I ask Eleanor if we can offer a deal to someone in exchange for finding Bobby right now. She looks uncomfortable and says plea deals are complicated, especially in cases this serious. I tell her about Dr. Hodges and how he created all of us, how he must know where the network sends girls. Eleanor says offering him a deal would be difficult, because he's the architect of the entire operation, the one person who deserves the harshest sentence. I start crying and tell her I don't care about punishing him if it means Bobby stays trapped in some shipping container. Jerome puts his hand on my shoulder and tells Eleanor that finding the missing girls has to be the priority, that justice doesn't mean anything if they're all dead before the trial. Eleanor sits quiet for a minute, then says she'll talk to Hodges' lawyer about potential cooperation. 2 days later, Eleanor calls to say Hodges wants to talk. He'll provide information about current operations in exchange for a reduced sentence, maybe 15 years instead of life. Jerome drives me to the jail where they're holding Hodges, and we meet with Eleanor in a conference room. Hodges sits across from us wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than he did at the clinic. His lawyer sits beside him, a man in an expensive suit who keeps checking his watch. Eleanor explains the terms of the deal and Hodges nods, then starts talking. He says the 5 missing Rebeccas, including Bobby, are being held at a facility outside Bucharest, Romania. He gives Eleanor GPS coordinates and writes down the name Victor Antonescu, the local contact who runs operations there. Hodges explains that Victor keeps high-value girls at this location for clients who pay extra for specific requests. He says Bobby is there because she knows too much about the American side of the network, and they can't risk sending her to regular buyers. I ask how long she's been there, and he says probably 2 weeks based on when she was moved from the shipping container. Eleanor asks about security at the facility, and Hodges describes it as a converted warehouse with guards and surveillance cameras. He says Victor usually has 4 or 5 guards on duty, and keeps the girls in locked rooms on the 2nd floor. Eleanor contacts May Gonzalez, an FBI agent who handles international trafficking cases. May joins us at the FBI office that afternoon and spreads maps across the conference table showing locations in Romania, Moldova, and Bulgaria. She explains that she's been tracking Victor Antonescu for 3 years, but could never get solid evidence linking him to American victims. The GPS coordinates Hodges provided match a warehouse her team had under surveillance 6 months ago. May starts making calls to Romanian authorities and Interpol, coordinating a plan to raid the Bucharest facility and 3 other locations connected to Victor's network. She tells me these operations are extremely dangerous because traffickers often kill their victims if they think they're about to be caught. Even with perfect intelligence, there's no guarantee we'll find everyone alive or that Victor won't move the girls before we can get there. I ask how long it will take to plan the raid, and she says 2 days minimum, maybe 3. Every hour we wait feels impossible knowing Bobby is locked in some warehouse. I tell May I want to be there when they rescue Bobby. She immediately says no, explaining that I'm a civilian and a victim, that bringing me would be against protocol and potentially dangerous. I argue that Bobby will be scared and traumatized, that seeing me might help her feel safe. May says the Romanian tactical team will handle the rescue, and I can see Bobby after she's been secured and checked by medics. Jerome speaks up and says I deserve to be present, that I've earned the right to be there when Bobby is found. May and Jerome argue for 20 minutes while I sit there feeling useless. Finally, May agrees that I can come to Romania and be nearby during the operation, but I have to stay back with the command team until the facility is completely secure. I agree immediately, even though I want to be the first person through the door. We fly to Romania 2 days later on a military transport plane. I barely sleep on the flight. Just stare at the photo of Bobby I have on my phone. The one from before everything happened when she was smiling and had all her teeth. Jerome sits beside me the whole time telling me stories about Bobby when she was little, how she used to climb trees and refused to come down, how she brought home stray cats and hid them in her room until her dad found them. He says she was always stubborn and brave, always fighting against rules she thought were unfair. The stories help a little, reminding me that Bobby is strong and has survived horrible things before. May spends the flight on her laptop coordinating with the Romanian team and reviewing building plans. Faith is monitoring communications from FBI headquarters, watching for any sign that Victor knows we're coming. The Romanian team meets us at a military base outside Bucharest. Their commander is a serious man named Radu who speaks perfect English and has been tracking Victor for years. He spreads blueprints across a table showing the warehouse layout, a 2-story building with offices on the ground floor and converted storage rooms upstairs. They have surveillance footage from cameras they installed on nearby buildings, showing 5 young women inside, all matching our general description. The guards change shifts every 12 hours, and there are usually 4 of them, plus Victor himself. Radu explains that his tactical team will breach at 4 in the morning when the guards are most likely to be tired. They'll use flashbangs and move fast, securing each room before Victor can hurt anyone. May asks about escape routes, and Radu shows her 3 possible exits that his team will cover. I study the blueprints trying to memorize where Bobby might be, which room could be hers. Radu gives me a bulletproof vest and tells me I'll wait with the command team 2 blocks away until the building is secure. I put on the vest even though it's heavy and uncomfortable, grateful to have any protection. Faith sets up communications equipment in the command van, connecting us to the tactical team's radio frequency. May goes over the operation timeline one more time, making sure everyone understands their role. Jerome checks his weapon and stands near me, ready to go in with the tactical team when they breach. I watch the clock count down the hours until 4 in the morning, each minute feeling like forever. Faith monitors communications constantly, checking for any transmission that might indicate Victor knows we're coming. Everything stays quiet on the network and she gives the all-clear signal. Radu's team loads into vehicles and drives toward the warehouse while we follow behind in the command van. The van stops 2 blocks from the warehouse and I sit in the back with headphones on listening to the tactical team's radio frequency. Faith is beside me watching her laptop screen showing thermal imaging of the building, counting the heat signatures inside. Jerome checks his weapon one more time and looks at me with an expression that says he knows I won't stay in the van no matter what he told me earlier. The clock on Faith's laptop shows 3:58 in the morning, and everything feels frozen in time waiting for 4 o'clock to arrive. Radu's voice comes through the radio speaking Romanian to his team, and then switching to English. The thermal imaging shows 4 guards on the ground floor, and 5 smaller signatures upstairs that must be the girls. My hands shake so badly I have to grip the edge of the seat to keep them still. At exactly 4 o'clock, I hear the flashbangs go off even from 2 blocks away, muffled pops that make my heart jump into my throat. The radio explodes with shouting in Romanian and English, boots pounding on concrete, someone yelling commands I can't understand. Faith grips my arm, but I'm already pulling off the headphones and reaching for the van door. Jerome doesn't try to stop me this time, just follows me out onto the street as I run toward the warehouse. The building is gray concrete with broken windows and graffiti covering the lower walls. 2 Romanian agents stand by the entrance with their weapons drawn, but they step aside when they see Jerome behind me. Inside the warehouse, the air smells like mold and something chemical that burns my nose. The ground floor is mostly empty except for a makeshift office area with a desk and filing cabinets, papers scattered everywhere from the raid. I hear crying from upstairs and take the metal stairs 2 at a time with Jerome right behind me calling my name. The second floor opens into a long room divided by chain link fencing into separate cages, each one barely big enough for a person to lie down. Radu and his team have 4 men in handcuffs on the floor, but I don't look at them because I'm scanning the cages for Bobby. In the 3rd cage from the left, I see her curled in the corner with her knees pulled to her chest, head shaved down to almost nothing, face covered in bruises that make her barely recognizable. She's wearing a gray shirt that's too big and thin pants that look like hospital scrubs. I say her name and she looks up with eyes that seem too big for her face now. She reaches toward me through the chain link and starts crying, these horrible broken sobs that make my chest hurt. One of the Romanian agents cuts the lock with bolt cutters and I pull the cage door open, dropping to my knees beside her. She falls into my arms shaking so hard I think she might break apart, whispering my name over and over mixed with words I can't understand. I hold her and tell her she's safe now. I found her. She's going home, even though I'm crying too hard to speak clearly. Her body feels too thin under the loose clothes and I can feel her ribs through the fabric. She pulls back to look at my face and touches my cheek like she needs to make sure I'm real. The other cages hold 4 more girls, and when I look at them, my brain struggles to process what I'm seeing, because they all have my face. They're all me, or I'm all them. The same features repeated in different states of damage. One girl has a black eye, another has a split lip, A third is rocking back and forth humming to herself. They're all thin and scared and staring at us with expressions that mix hope with disbelief. Jerome kneels beside the nearest cage and speaks softly to the girl inside, introducing himself and explaining that they're FBI and she's safe now. The Romanian agents cut all the locks and the girls come out slowly like they don't trust that this is real. I help Bobby stand, but her legs won't hold her weight, so I support her while Jerome calls for the paramedics. The girl with the black eye comes over to us and stares at my face, then at Bobby, then back at me. She looks maybe 17 or 18, wearing the same gray uniform as Bobby, her hair shaved like all of theirs. She reaches out and touches my arm like she's testing if I'm solid, then starts crying and saying something in Romanian mixed with English. Another girl joins us, and I recognize the pattern now, the same bone structure and eye color and height that marks us as copies. They cluster around me and Bobby, all of us identical and all of us broken in different ways by the same people. The paramedics arrive with stretchers and medical bags, checking each girl quickly for immediate injuries. One paramedic tries to take Bobby from me, but she won't let go of my hand, gripping so tight her nails dig into my skin. I tell the paramedic I'm coming with her, and he nods, helping us both toward the stairs. The Romanian agents are taking photos of the cages and collecting evidence while Radu interviews the handcuffed men in rapid Romanian. As we pass them, I look at their faces, trying to memorize the people who kept Bobby in a cage like an animal. One of them meets my eyes and smirks until Radu kicks him in the ribs and tells him something that wipes the expression away. Outside the warehouse, the sun is starting to rise, turning the sky gray and pink. 5 ambulances wait in the street with their lights flashing, and paramedics help each girl into a separate vehicle. I climb into the ambulance with Bobby and sit beside her while the paramedic checks her vital signs and starts an IV. She keeps her hand locked around mine the whole time, occasionally looking at me like she needs to confirm I'm still there. The other 4 girls are loaded into their ambulances, and we all head toward the hospital in a convoy. During the ride, Bobby tries to talk, but her voice comes out raspy and broken, so I tell her she doesn't have to explain anything yet. The paramedic says she's severely dehydrated and malnourished, probably hasn't had proper food or water in days. At the hospital, doctors take all 5 girls to a private wing that Radu arranged ahead of time, away from the main emergency room. They put Bobby in a bed and start running tests while I stand beside her, refusing to leave even when nurses suggest I wait outside. May arrives an hour later with a translator and starts gently interviewing each girl about what happened to them. I listen as the girl with the black eye explains through the translator that she was taken from a camp in Alabama 6 weeks ago, drugged and put on a plane, woke up in the cage. The girl who was rocking tells a similar story about being grabbed from a facility in Mississippi. Each story is the same pattern. Religious family sends them to conversion camp. Camp drugs them. They wake up in Romania. Bobby finally speaks after the doctor gives her water and checks her throat. She tells me and May about finding papers at Holy Redemption before they moved her, documents that explained what we really are. She says she saw files from the fertility clinic showing how Hodges created all 17 of us using the same genetic material, designed us specifically to be trafficking victims. She says the documents called us a product line, explained that identical girls are valuable to certain buyers who want matching sets for their collections. The words make me feel sick, but also explain so much about why this happened to us. May writes everything down and asks careful questions about who Bobby saw at the facility, what names she heard, where else they might be holding girls. Bobby describes a man named Victor who ran the warehouse operation and talked on the phone in English about shipping schedules and payments. She says Victor mentioned other facilities in Moldova and Ukraine, that this warehouse was just one location in a bigger network. Jerome comes in while we're talking and sits down heavily in a chair, looking exhausted. He tells us that the raids across Eastern Europe happened simultaneously an hour ago, while we were at the hospital. They hit 6 locations total, and rescued 8 more girls, including 3 more Rebeccas. That means 8 of us are safe now, counting the 5 here. He says Rebecca 4 was found in Moldova, Rebecca 8 in Ukraine, Rebecca 11 in Bulgaria. The other 5 rescued girls aren't Rebeccas, but they're all American teenagers taken from similar camps. I do the math in my head. 8 Rebeccas accounted for out of 17 total, which means 9 are still missing. May sees my expression and explains that some of the missing girls might be dead, or might have been sold to private buyers years ago, and could be anywhere in the world now. Over the next week, all 8 rescued Rebeccas stay in the hospital recovering while Romanian authorities process our cases. The doctors treat everyone for malnutrition and dehydration, plus various injuries from abuse and confinement. Bobby gains back some weight and her voice gets stronger, though she still has nightmares that wake her up screaming. The hospital sets up a conference room where all 8 of us can meet together with therapists present to help us process what happened. Walking into that room and seeing 7 other versions of my own face is the most strange and disturbing experience of my life. We all stare at each other in silence for a long moment, taking in the reality of being identical copies created in a lab. The girl who was rocking in the cage introduces herself as Rebecca 3, though she says her family called her Melody before they sent her to the camp. She's been in the trafficking network for 4 months and has scars on her wrists from trying to escape. Rebecca 9 says she wants to be called by the number because it reminds her that she survived when others didn't. Rebecca 14 and 16 are younger than the rest of us. Only 16 and 17. Both of them quiet and scared. Rebecca 4 from Moldova has a thick accent from living in Texas. Rebecca 8 from Ukraine barely speaks because her throat was damaged. Rebecca 11 from Bulgaria won't stop crying. We sit in a circle and slowly start sharing our stories, finding comfort in the fact that we all understand exactly what the others went through. The therapist helps us process the reality that we were created specifically to be trafficked, that everything about our existence was designed by Hodges for profit. The girl who's been calling herself Rebecca 3 stands up in the conference room and looks at all of us with tired eyes. She clears her throat and says her family used to call her Melody before they sent her to that camp, and she wants that name back because it belonged to her before anyone tried to make her into a product. She suggests we should all pick our own names if we want, something that means something to us instead of numbers someone assigned us in a lab. Some of the other girls nod and start talking about keeping Rebecca as part of their names, because it's still ours even if we didn't choose it originally, while others say they want to start completely fresh with names that have nothing to do with what was done to us. I sit there listening to everyone talk and think about what I want to be called now that I know the truth about where I came from. The name my captor gave me feels wrong because she was paid to raise me and sell me and Rebecca. 7 is just a number that marks me as property. I think about the moment everything changed, when I climbed out that window with $300 and decided to fight instead of accept what they planned for me. That was at dawn, right when the sun was coming up and the sky was turning from black to gray. I look around the circle at all these faces that match mine and tell everyone to call me Dawn from now on, after the moment I started fighting back and refused to be what they created me to be. Melody smiles at me and says, "That's a good name. A strong name." Bobby reaches over and squeezes my hand, and when it's her turn to talk, she says she's keeping the name Bobby because her uncle Jerome gave it to her, and it represents the person she became despite everything her father did to her. She looks at me and says, "We get to write our own story now, together, and nobody can take that away from us." The therapist, who's been sitting quietly in the corner, writes down all our chosen names in her notebook and tells us this is an important step in reclaiming our identities from the people who tried to define us. 3 days later, I'm sitting in the hospital room with Bobby when my phone rings with a number I recognize as Eleanor, the prosecutor building the case against everyone involved in the trafficking network. I answer, and she tells me the trials are moving forward much faster than expected because Hodges decided to cooperate fully in exchange for his reduced sentence. She says my captor is facing federal trafficking charges along with Pastor Williams, the sheriff, and 15 other network members, all of them looking at mandatory minimum sentences that will keep them locked up for decades. The evidence is overwhelming because Hodges kept detailed records of everything, every payment and every placement and every girl who went through the system. Eleanor explains that my captor will probably get 20 to 25 years, Pastor Williams about the same, and the sheriff slightly less because he was mostly just covering things up instead of actively recruiting. I ask about the other people involved and she lists off names I've never heard before. People from other towns and other states who were all part of this same network selling children. She promises to keep me updated as the trials progress and says I'll need to testify eventually, but not for several months while they build the full case. After I hang up, I tell Bobby what Eleanor said, and she closes her eyes for a long moment before saying she's glad they're all going to prison, but it doesn't make what happened to us go away. May comes to visit us the next afternoon with updates about the search for the missing Rebeccas. She sits down in the chair next to my bed and pulls out a folder with photos and documents, explaining that international law enforcement agencies are actively searching in 3 different countries right now. They have solid leads on Rebecca 1 in Germany, possible sightings of Rebecca 10 in France, and some financial records that suggest Rebecca 13 might be in Spain. May promises they won't stop looking until every single one of us is found, dead or alive, because we all deserve closure about what happened to our sisters. She shows me photos of the search teams working in different cities, following up on tips and interviewing people who might have information. I study the faces of the agents in the photos and wonder if they understand what it means to us, knowing that people are out there looking and refusing to give up. May tells me the search could take months or even years depending on how well the traffickers hid their tracks, but the FBI has committed significant resources to finding everyone. She squeezes my shoulder before she leaves and says she'll call the moment they have any news about the missing girls. The Romanian government sets us up in temporary housing the following week, a small building near the hospital where all 8 of us can stay together while we recover enough to travel home. The social workers explain that we'll have access to medical care and counseling and anything else we need for as long as we're here. They give us clean clothes and personal items and show us to rooms that are simple but comfortable, nothing like the cages we were kept in. That first night in the housing facility, I lie in bed listening to the sounds of the other girls moving around, some of them crying quietly, and others whispering to each other in the darkness. Bobby sleeps in the bed next to mine and reaches out to hold my hand across the gap between us. Over the next few days, we start forming routines together, eating meals at the same table and watching television in the common room, and taking walks outside when the weather is nice. It's strange living with 7 other versions of myself, but there's also something comforting about being around people who understand exactly what happened without needing explanations. We become an impromptu family of survivors, sharing our stories and supporting each other through the nightmares and panic attacks that still come regularly. Rebecca, 9, who insists on keeping her number, makes breakfast for everyone most mornings because she says cooking helps her feel normal. Rebecca, 14, draws pictures of things she remembers from before the trafficking, trying to hold on to memories that feel like they're slipping away. We look out for each other in ways that nobody else could because we know what it's like to be treated as property instead of people. A woman named Dawn Peacock arrives at our housing facility 2 weeks after the rescue, introduced by the social workers as a therapist who specializes in helping trafficking survivors process their trauma. She's in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm voice that makes me feel safe almost immediately. She starts meeting with each of us individually and then in group sessions, helping us talk through what happened and how we're feeling about our manufactured identities. During my first private session with her, I break down crying about being created specifically to be sold, about being nothing more than a product designed for profit. Dawn listens without interrupting, and then tells me that being created for a horrible purpose doesn't define my worth or limit my future, that I'm a real person with real feelings and real choices ahead of me. She explains that trauma changes us but doesn't have to destroy us, that healing is possible even when it feels impossible. Over multiple sessions, she teaches me techniques for managing panic attacks and processing memories without being overwhelmed by them. She helps me understand that my identity isn't tied to being Rebecca 7, or even to being one of 17 identical girls, that I'm Dawn now, and I get to decide what that means. The work is hard and painful, and sometimes I want to quit, but Dawn keeps showing up and believing in me even when I don't believe in myself. Freddie Duke, the FBI tech specialist who helped trace the encrypted messages, comes to give us a presentation about how the trafficking network operated. He sets up his laptop in the common room and shows us screenshots of the communications between different network members, explaining how they used coded language and encryption to hide their activities. He walks us through the recruitment methods they used, targeting families in extreme religious communities where girls had limited contact with the outside world. He shows us the financial records tracking payments for each girl, the shipping manifests disguised as legitimate cargo, the fake adoption papers they used to move us across borders. Understanding the system makes me feel less powerless somehow, like I can see the mechanics of what happened instead of just feeling like a helpless victim. Freddie explains that the information we provide about our experiences helps the FBI identify other potential victims and shut down similar operations. He asks if any of us remember specific details about the people who held us or the facilities where we were kept, and we all contribute pieces of information that he carefully writes down. Before he leaves, he tells us that our cooperation is helping save other girls who might have ended up in the same situation, and that makes the painful process of remembering feel slightly more worthwhile. 3 weeks after the rescue, doctors finally clear all 8 of us to travel back to the United States. Jerome makes arrangements for us to fly together on a private flight he coordinates through the FBI, wanting to make sure we feel safe and supported during the journey home. The morning we're scheduled to leave, I pack the few belongings I've accumulated during our stay in Romania and say goodbye to the social workers who helped take care of us. Several of us exchange phone numbers and email addresses, making plans to stay in contact and support each other through whatever comes next. Rebecca, 11, who barely spoke for the first 2 weeks, hugs me tight before we board the plane and whispers that she's glad we found each other. The flight is long and exhausting, but also feels like freedom, like we're finally leaving behind the worst of what happened and moving towards something better. Jerome sits with Bobby and me near the front of the plane, and at one point he tells us he's proud of how strong we've been through all of this. When we land in Atlanta, I see American soil through the airplane window and start crying without really knowing why. Some mixture of relief and grief and hope all tangled together. Jerome drives Bobby and me to a small apartment he helped find for us in a quiet neighborhood not far from where he lives. It's nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom place on the 2nd floor of an older building, but it's ours and nobody can take it away from us. He already furnished it with basics like a bed and couch and kitchen table, plus he stocked the refrigerator with groceries so we wouldn't have to worry about shopping right away. Bobby walks through the rooms touching everything like she can't believe it's real, running her hands along the walls and looking out the windows at the street below. This is the freedom we planned for all those months ago when we were just teenagers dreaming about running away together, except now it's actually happening and it's not romantic or exciting, it's just real and hard and ours. Jerome gives us the keys and shows us how to work the locks and the thermostat, then tells us he's just 10 minutes away if we need anything at all. After he leaves, Bobby and I stand in the middle of the empty living room holding hands and looking at each other, both of us understanding that this is the beginning of something we have to build ourselves. It's not the escape we imagined back then, but it's real, and it's ours, and nobody designed it for us or decided what it should be. 2 weeks after we move into the apartment, I walk into the community college admissions office with my GED results and the paperwork Jerome helped me fill out. The woman behind the desk looks at my transcript showing I finished high school through a program for trafficking survivors and doesn't ask questions, just processes my enrollment. I sign up for basic classes like English and math, subjects I barely studied during my homeschooling because Mom focused on teaching me to cook and clean instead. Bobby comes with me to register, and while I'm filling out forms, she picks up a course catalog, flipping through pages until she stops on the art section. She shows me a painting class that meets twice a week and asks if I think she should try it. I tell her yes without hesitation, because I remember how she used to draw on napkins at diners during our summer together, always making little sketches of things she saw. We walk to the financial aid office next, and a counselor explains that both of us qualify for grants and scholarships designed for survivors, which means we can go to the school without worrying about money. The relief hits me hard because I spent so many nights as a teenager dreaming about college while knowing Mom would never let me go. Bobby squeezes my hand under the table, and I realize we're actually doing this, actually building the life we planned, except now it's real instead of fantasy. Classes start 3 weeks later, and I sit in my first English lecture surrounded by people my age who grew up normal, who don't know what it's like to discover you were manufactured in a lab. The professor talks about personal narratives and asks us to write about a formative experience, and I have to stop myself from laughing because where would I even start? Bobby's art class meets in a studio with big windows, and when I pick her up after her first session, she's covered in paint, grinning wider than I've seen since before everything happened. She shows me a canvas with bold strokes of red and black, abstract shapes that don't look like anything specific, but somehow capture the feeling of being trapped and breaking free. Her teacher told her she has natural talent and should consider majoring in art, which makes Bobby's eyes light up with possibility. Over the next few weeks, we fall into a routine where I study at the kitchen table, while she paints in the corner we set up as her workspace, both of us working toward futures we're choosing ourselves. Jerome calls every few days to check on us, and sometimes brings groceries or just sits with us watching TV, being the family neither of us had growing up. One night, Bobby finishes a painting of a girl with no face standing in front of a fence, and when I ask what it means, she says it's her trying to remember who she was before her father sent her to that camp. The painting makes me cry because I understand exactly what she's expressing, that feeling of losing yourself and having to rebuild from nothing. 4 months after the rescue, Eleanor calls to tell me the trial is starting and I need to come to the courthouse to testify. My stomach drops because I've been dreading this moment, knowing I'll have to face the woman who raised me and tell a room full of strangers about being Rebecca 7. Bobby offers to come with me, and I accept immediately because I don't think I can do this alone. We drive to the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta on a cold morning in November, and Jerome meets us at the entrance to walk us through security. The courtroom is smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that make everything look harsh and clinical. I sit in the witness waiting room with Bobby holding my hand, while Eleanor goes over my testimony one more time, reminding me to speak clearly and answer only what's asked. When they call my name, I walk into the courtroom and see the woman I called Mom sitting at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair grayer than I remember and her face blank. I take the oath with my hand shaking so badly I almost drop the Bible, then sit in the witness box trying not to look at her. Eleanor starts with easy questions about my childhood, asking me to describe growing up in the religious community and how Mom homeschooled me. I tell the jury about the isolation, the constant church services, the way Mom controlled every aspect of my life while telling me it was for my own good. Then Eleanor asks me to explain what I learned about my identity after the FBI investigation began, and I have to say out loud that I'm not actually the woman's daughter, but a genetically engineered clone created to be trafficked. Several jury members look shocked, and one woman covers her mouth with her hand. I explain finding out I was Rebecca 7, one of 17 identical girls manufactured by Dr. Hodges and placed with families who were paid to raise us until we could be sold. Eleanor shows me documents from the fertility clinic with my designation and placement details, and I confirm that's my file, even though seeing it makes me feel sick. The defense attorney tries to object multiple times, but the judge overrules him, saying the evidence is relevant to establishing motive. When Eleanor asks about my relationship with Bobby, I glance at the front row where she's sitting, her eyes locked on mine, giving me strength. I tell the court about meeting Bobby, falling in love with her, planning to run away together before we both got sent to Holy Redemption. I describe discovering the trafficking operation and finding Jerome, then learning that Mom had been recruiting girls for years and getting paid $50,000 for each one. Eleanor asks how I felt learning this information, and I say I felt like my entire life was a lie, like I never actually mattered to the woman who raised me except as a product to be sold. The defense attorney cross-examines me, trying to suggest I'm confused or manipulated by the FBI, but I stay calm and repeat the facts exactly as they happened. He asks if Mom ever physically abused me, and I say no. She was just preparing me for my role, which somehow feels worse than if she'd been violent. After 2 hours of testimony, the judge dismisses me, and I walk past Mom's table without looking at her. But I hear her whisper my name, or maybe Rebecca 7, I can't tell which. Bobby meets me in the hallway and wraps her arms around me while I shake, telling me I did amazing, and it's over now. Jerome says my testimony was powerful, and Eleanor thinks the jury believed every word, which matters because the evidence needs to be overwhelming to convict on all counts. The next 2 weeks blur together as all 8 rescued Rebeccas take turns testifying, each of us telling our individual stories to the jury. Rebecca 3 goes first after me, describing how her captor sold her when she was 16, after years of sexual abuse disguised as religious education. She breaks down crying on the stand, and the judge has to call a recess. But when she comes back, she finishes her testimony with her voice steady and strong. Rebecca 9 talks about being moved between 3 different facilities over 2 years, each one claiming to offer education while actually preparing her for trafficking. Rebecca 14 describes the shipping container where she was held with 5 other girls, the way they rationed water and tried to keep each other alive in the darkness. Rebecca 16 explains how she almost died from an infection before the FBI raid because her captors refused to provide medical care. Rebecca 4 tells the jury about watching another girl get beaten to death for trying to escape, her voice flat and emotionless like she's reading from a script. Rebecca 8 breaks down describing the buyers who came to inspect them like livestock, touching their faces and checking their teeth. Rebecca 11 barely whispers her testimony about being raped repeatedly by guards, and several jury members wipe their eyes. Each Rebecca looks exactly like me. Same face telling different horror stories, and the visual impact on the jury is obvious. They keep glancing between us and the defendants, seeing the evidence of a systematic conspiracy to create and destroy human lives. Eleanor tells me later that our collective testimony was the most powerful evidence she's ever presented in 30 years as a prosecutor. She says watching 8 identical faces describe different paths to the same nightmare made it impossible for the jury to see us as anything but victims of a deliberate, organized crime. The defense attorneys try various strategies with each of us, suggesting we're confused or coached or seeking attention, but none of it works because our stories are too detailed and too consistent in the ways that matter. They can't explain away the genetic evidence, the clinic records, the financial transactions, the shipping manifests, all of it pointing to the same conclusion. During Rebecca 11's testimony, one of the defense attorneys makes the mistake of suggesting she's exaggerating her trauma for sympathy. She looks him dead in the eye and describes exactly what was done to her in explicit detail until the judge tells her she can stop. The attorney sits down and doesn't ask any more questions. By the end of the second week, the prosecution rests its case, and Eleanor says she's confident we did everything we could to get justice. 3 weeks later, the jury comes back with guilty verdicts on all counts for every defendant, and the judge schedules sentencing for the following month. When sentencing day arrives, I go back to the courthouse with Bobby and Jerome, sitting in the gallery while the judge reads through each defendant's crimes and determines their punishment. Dr. Hodges stands first to hear his sentence, his lawyer arguing for leniency based on his cooperation with the investigation. The judge listens to the argument, then says no amount of cooperation can excuse creating human beings specifically to be trafficked, designing children to be victims from their first breath. She sentences him to 30 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, and Dr. Hodges' face goes white as they lead him away. My captor goes next, and her lawyer tries to argue she was manipulated by the network, that she didn't understand the full scope of what she was participating in. Eleanor stands up and reminds the court that the woman received $50,000 per girl and recruited at least 12 victims, including her own supposed daughter. The judge sentences her to 25 years, saying her betrayal of maternal duty makes her crimes especially heinous. Pastor Williams gets 20 years for his role coordinating the network and trafficking his own daughter, and the judge says his abuse of religious authority to prey on vulnerable families deserves no mercy. The sheriff gets 15 years for obstruction of justice and conspiracy, his career and reputation destroyed by his choice to protect traffickers instead of victims. As each sentence is read, I feel Bobby's hand tighten in mine, both of us processing the fact that these people will spend decades in prison for what they did to us. It doesn't undo the trauma or give us back the years we lost, but it's something solid, something real that says what happened to us mattered, and the people responsible have to face consequences. After the last sentencing, we walk out of the courthouse into bright sunlight, and Jerome takes us to lunch, the 3 of us sitting in a diner processing everything that just happened. Bobby says she thought she'd feel more satisfied seeing them sentenced, but instead she just feels tired, ready to move forward instead of looking back. I understand exactly what she means because revenge doesn't heal trauma, it just closes a chapter so you can start writing the next one. 2 days after the sentencing, May calls my phone with news that makes me drop the dish I'm washing. They found Rebecca 2 alive in Germany, rescued from a different trafficking network that purchased her 3 years ago from the same suppliers. May says Rebecca 2 is physically okay, but severely traumatized, held in isolation for most of her captivity, and conditioned to believe no one was looking for her. She's in a hospital in Berlin receiving treatment and asking about the other Rebeccas, wanting to know if she's the only one or if there are more like her. I tell May to give Rebecca 2 my number, and within an hour my phone rings with a call from Germany. The voice on the other end sounds exactly like mine, but with a German accent from years of captivity, and she asks if I'm really Rebecca 7, or if this is another trick. I tell her my whole story from meeting Bobby to the FBI investigation to the trial, and she starts crying, saying she thought she was alone in the world. Rebecca 2 explains that her captors told her she was the only one, that she was specially created for a specific buyer who wanted a unique product. She believed them for 3 years until German police raided the facility last week and showed her photos of the other Rebeccas. I promise her she's not alone anymore, that there are 9 of us who survived and we're building lives together. She asks if she can come to Atlanta when she's released from the hospital, and I say yes immediately. We'll help her get settled and figure out her next steps. After we hang up, I sit on the couch staring at my phone, processing the fact that another Rebecca survived and wants to join our strange manufactured family. Bobby asks if I'm okay, and I say I don't know, that every time I think I understand the full scope of what happened to us, something new emerges. She reminds me that finding Rebecca 2 alive is good news, that it means more of us survived than we thought. I know she's right, but I also can't stop thinking about the 4 Rebeccas still missing, wondering if they're alive somewhere waiting to be found, or if they're gone forever. The next week, May calls again, but this time the news makes me want to throw up. They found DNA evidence confirming that Rebecca 6 and Rebecca 15 are dead, killed by their traffickers when they tried to escape their captivity. May explains that both girls were identified through remains found at facilities in Eastern Europe, their bodies disposed of like trash when they became too difficult to control. Rebecca 6 died 2 years ago at 17, beaten to death after she attacked a guard trying to protect another victim. Rebecca 15 died 6 months ago at 18, killed when she tried to run during a transfer between facilities. May says she's sorry and asks if we want to hold some kind of memorial service for them, giving us a chance to mourn even though most of us never met them. I say yes because they deserve to be remembered as people, not just as Rebecca 6 and Rebecca 15, or as products that didn't make it to market. Jerome helps us organize a small memorial service at a park in Atlanta, inviting all the surviving Rebeccas and the FBI agents who worked on the case. 8 of us gather around 2 trees Jerome planted in their memory, each tree tagged with a plaque that says, "In memory of a sister lost." Rebecca 3 reads a poem she wrote about girls who look the same but lived different lives, all of us connected by DNA and trauma. Rebecca 9 places flowers at the base of each tree and says a prayer even though most of us aren't religious anymore, after what was done to us in religion's name. I stand there looking at my identical sisters gathered around these trees and think about how Rebecca 6 and Rebecca 15 never got the chance we have, never got to choose their own names or build their own lives. Bobby squeezes my hand and whispers that we're honoring them by surviving, by refusing to let what happened to us define our entire existence. After the service, we all go to a restaurant together, 9 Rebeccas and Jerome and May, sitting around a big table sharing stories about our recoveries. It's strange and sad and somehow comforting all at once, this group of manufactured people who found each other and decided to be family. The following week, May calls with an update about Rebecca 1, and the news is frustrating. The investigation is ongoing, but the trail has gone completely cold. No solid leads about where she might be, or even if she's still alive. May explains that Rebecca 1 was trafficked earlier than the rest of us, sold when she was only 14, and the network that purchased her has since been dismantled with most members dead or imprisoned. They're following up on reports from various countries, but nothing concrete has emerged, and after 5 years, the chances of finding her alive decrease significantly. I ask May if they're going to keep looking, and she promises they won't stop, that Rebecca 1's case remains open and active even if progress is slow. After we hang up, I sit at the kitchen table feeling guilty, knowing I'm free and safe while Rebecca 1 is still out there somewhere. Bobby finds me crying and asks what's wrong, and I tell her I feel like I should be doing more to find her, that I escaped while she's still trapped. Bobby reminds me that I almost died trying to save her, that I did everything I could, and it's not my fault the network moved her before we could reach her. I know she's right logically, but emotionally it doesn't help. This weight of survivor's guilt that sits on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The next day, I have a session with Dawn, the therapist who specializes in trafficking survivors, and I tell her about the guilt I feel over Rebecca 1. Dawn explains that survivor's guilt is common among people who escaped situations where others didn't, that it's a normal response to trauma, but not a helpful one. She asks me what I would tell Rebecca 1 if I could talk to her right now, and I say I would tell her I'm looking for her, and I haven't given up. Dawn suggests I write letters to Rebecca 1 even if I can't send them, using them as a way to process my feelings and maintain hope without letting guilt consume me. I start writing letters that night, telling Rebecca one about our lives in Atlanta and the other Rebeccas she hasn't met yet, promising her that we're waiting for her whenever she comes home. It doesn't fix the guilt, but it gives me something concrete to do with all these feelings, a way to honor her existence, even when I can't find her. 6 months after the rescue, Jerome organizes a gathering at his house for all 9 surviving Rebeccas who've been found. Rebecca, too, flies in from Germany where she's been staying with relatives, still adjusting to freedom after 3 years in captivity. We all arrive at Jerome's house on a Saturday afternoon and spend the first hour just staring at each other, 9 identical faces in different stages of healing. Rebecca 3, who goes by Melody now, brings photo albums showing her new life in Texas with a foster family who treats her like their actual daughter. Rebecca 9 talks about starting nursing school because she wants to help other trauma survivors, turning her experience into purpose. Rebecca 14 shows us scars on her arms from the shipping container and says she's learning to see them as proof she survived instead of shame. Rebecca 16 barely talks, but smiles when Rebecca 8 makes jokes, the two of them having bonded during recovery. Rebecca 4 brings her service dog who helps her manage PTSD symptoms, and the dog immediately makes friends with everyone. Rebecca 11 plays guitar and sings a song she wrote about finding family in unexpected places, her voice stronger than it was during the trial. Rebecca 2 cries through most of the gathering, overwhelmed by meeting everyone after years of believing she was alone. Bobby and I show them our apartment and the paintings she's been creating, and several Rebeccas ask if they can buy pieces because they want to support her art. Jerome makes dinner for all of us, and we sit around his dining table eating and sharing stories, sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, but always feeling less alone. At one point, Rebecca 9 asks if we should come up with a group name for ourselves, something that acknowledges what we are without letting it define us. Someone suggests the Rebeccas, but that feels too tied to our manufactured designation. Rebecca 3 proposes Beyond 7 as a way of claiming the number that was supposed to limit us, and everyone agrees that feels right. We take a group photo before everyone leaves, 9 identical faces smiling despite everything we've been through, proof that we're more than the purpose we were created for. After everyone goes home, Bobby and I lie in bed talking about how strange it was seeing so many versions of ourselves, how it made us feel less alone but also more aware of how much trauma we all carry. I tell her I'm glad we have each other and this weird manufactured family, that it makes the survival feel worthwhile. 2 months after the gathering, Esther calls to tell me she's starting a support organization for survivors of religious trafficking and identity abuse. She wants to call it Beyond 7 after our group name, creating resources and support networks for people escaping situations like ours. Esther explains that she's been working with lawyers and therapists to develop programs that address the specific needs of trafficking survivors who were raised in religious communities, understanding that our trauma is complicated by the spiritual abuse we experienced. She asks if any of us want to volunteer and help get the organization off the ground, using our experiences to help others who are still trapped. I say yes immediately because I've been looking for ways to turn what happened to us into something meaningful, to make sure other girls don't go through what we did. Bobby volunteers too, offering to create art for fundraising events and awareness campaigns. Rebecca 9 joins as a volunteer coordinator, using her nursing school training to develop wellness programs for survivors. Rebecca 3 helps write educational materials about recognizing trafficking in religious communities, making it harder for networks to hide behind faith. Over the next few months, Beyond 7 grows from an idea into an actual organization with an office and staff and programs that help dozens of survivors. We hold support groups where people can share their experiences without judgment, provide resources for escaping abusive situations, and connect survivors with legal help and therapy. Esther runs the organization with the same determination she used to survive her own trafficking, refusing to let what happened to her be meaningless. Sometimes survivors come to our office and see multiple Rebeccas working there, and we have to explain our unusual situation. Most people are shocked at first, but then grateful because they realize we truly understand what it's like to have your identity stolen and your life controlled. The work is hard and sometimes triggering, hearing stories that mirror our own experiences, but it's also healing in a way therapy alone can't provide. Every person we help feels like a small victory against the people who tried to destroy us, proof that we're more than victims waiting to be saved. 1 year after we moved into our apartment, Bobby and I decide to throw a small party to celebrate our freedom. We invite Jerome and some of the other Rebeccas who live nearby, buying cheap wine and making food that probably isn't very good but tastes like victory anyway. Rebecca 3 drives up from Texas with her foster sister, and Rebecca 9 brings her girlfriend who she met in nursing school. Rebecca 2 flies in from Germany, where she's been working on her immigration paperwork, hoping to move to Atlanta permanently. Jerome arrives early to help us set up, bringing decorations and a cake that says, 1 year of freedom in blue frosting. When everyone arrives, we crowd into our small apartment, 9 people in a space meant for 2, but nobody minds the closeness. We eat and drink, and Jerome tells embarrassing stories about Bobby as a kid, making her laugh and throw napkins at him. Rebecca 9's girlfriend asks how we all know each other, and there's this moment of silence before Rebecca 3 says we're sisters, which is technically true even if the circumstances are weird. Someone suggests we go around and share what we're most grateful for this year, and each person talks about small victories like getting a job or making a friend or just waking up without nightmares. When it's my turn, I say I'm grateful for Bobby and for surviving and for this strange family we've built from the wreckage of what was done to us. Bobby says she's grateful for second chances and for me never giving up on finding her, and her voice cracks when she talks about how close she came to not making it. Jerome raises his glass and toasts to survival and chosen family and building lives that belong to us, instead of the people who tried to control us. We all drink and someone puts on music, and for a few hours we're just people at a party, not trafficking survivors or manufactured clones or victims of conspiracy. Later that night, after everyone leaves, Bobby and I clean up together, and she says this is better than the dramatic escape we imagined as teenagers. I ask what she means, and she explains that we dreamed about running away to some perfect life, where everything would be easy and romantic. Instead, we got this messy, complicated reality where we're still healing from trauma and building our lives one small step at a time. She says it's not the fairy tale we wanted, but it's genuine happiness built on survival and choice, and that makes it more valuable than any fantasy. I tell her I love her, and she kisses me, and we stand in our kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes and empty wine glasses, proof that we made it through hell and came out the other side still together. A few months after our one-year party, I get an email from the university's admissions office saying I've been accepted with a full scholarship for trafficking survivors. I read the message 3 times to make sure it's real before running to tell Bobby. She's painting in our tiny second bedroom that we turned into a studio, and when I tell her the news, she drops her brush and hugs me so tight I can barely breathe. The scholarship covers everything, including books and housing, which means I can actually study social work and help other people escape situations like ours. Bobby gets her own acceptance letter 2 weeks later from an art school downtown, and we celebrate by ordering pizza and staying up late talking about our future. She shows me sketches she's been working on for her portfolio, pieces about identity and freedom and survival that make my chest hurt in a good way. We pin both acceptance letters to our refrigerator next to photos of all the Rebeccas, proof that we're building real lives now instead of just surviving. Jerome calls me on a Tuesday morning to say he's retiring from the FBI after 30 years of service. He wants to meet for coffee, so I take the bus to the cafe near his office and find him sitting at our usual table by the window. He looks tired but happy, and he tells me he's staying involved in trafficking prevention work by training other agents how to spot the signs we missed for so long. He says our case changed how the FBI approaches religious organizations and fertility clinics, and that knowledge is going to save lives. Then he looks at me across the table and says he's proud of how Bobby and I turned our trauma into purpose and strength. His voice cracks a little when he talks about watching us build this life together, and I have to blink back tears because Jerome saved us when nobody else would. I tell him he's the reason we made it out, and he shakes his head and says we saved ourselves by refusing to give up on each other. We sit there for another hour talking about his retirement plans and my classes starting in the fall, and when we hug goodbye, I realize he's become the closest thing to real family I've ever had. The news breaks 3 months later that the fertility clinic got permanently shut down by the state medical board. I see the headline while scrolling through my phone during lunch break at my part-time job, and I immediately call Bobby to tell her. Dr. Hodges lost his medical license completely, which means he can never practice medicine again anywhere in the country. The article mentions new federal laws getting passed that require stricter oversight of fertility treatments and genetic research, and they specifically reference our case as the reason for the changes. Eleanor sends me a text saying the legislation passed with overwhelming support from both parties, and that our testimony helped convince lawmakers this kind of abuse can't happen again. I save the article to show the other Rebeccas at our next meeting, proof that something good came from all the horror we endured. Bobby frames a copy of the clinic closure notice and hangs it in her studio next to her paintings, a reminder that the people who tried to destroy us failed. Rebecca, too, calls me 6 months before Bobby's proposal to say she's moving to Atlanta permanently. She goes by May now, named after the agent who pulled her out of that facility in Germany, and her voice sounds stronger than the last time we talked. She found an apartment 3 blocks from ours and asks if I can help her move in next weekend. When Saturday comes, me and Bobby and Esther all show up with boxes and cleaning supplies, turning the empty space into something that feels like home. May struggles with loud noises and unexpected movements, flinching whenever someone walks up behind her, but being around people who understand her exact experience helps. She has nightmares most nights according to the text she sends me at 3 in the morning, and sometimes she calls just to hear another voice that sounds like hers. We start having weekly dinners at each other's apartments, taking turns cooking meals that are usually pretty bad but taste like family anyway. Having May nearby makes all of us feel less alone in our weird manufactured existence, like we're building our own support system outside of therapy and official programs. 2 years after the rescue, Bobby takes me on a drive without telling me where we're going. I recognize the route back to our hometown and my stomach drops. but she squeezes my hand and promises it's okay. We pull up to the old barn where we used to hide as teenagers, the place where we first kissed and planned our escape. The building looks smaller than I remember, paint peeling and roof sagging, but Bobby leads me inside anyway. Moonlight comes through the broken boards just like it did that summer night years ago, and she turns to face me with tears in her eyes. She says we promised each other we'd run away together and build a life, and now we actually get to do it for real instead of as scared kids with nowhere to go. Then she pulls a ring from her pocket, simple silver band that catches the light, and asks me to marry her. My vision blurs and I'm nodding before she even finishes the question, pulling her close and saying yes over and over until we're both crying and laughing. We stay in that barn for hours talking about our wedding and our future, and how far we've come from those desperate teenagers, and when we finally drive home, I keep looking at the ring on my finger like it might disappear. Planning the wedding takes 3 months of phone calls and scheduling around everyone's therapy appointments and work schedules. We decide to keep it small with just Jerome officiating and all the surviving Rebeccas as witnesses, maybe 20 people total in Jerome's backyard. Bobby designs the invitations herself, simple cards with intertwined trees that represent growth from broken roots. We pick a date in spring when the weather won't be too hot, and I find a simple dress at a thrift store that Bobby says makes me look beautiful. The planning feels different from the dramatic romantic escape we imagined as sheltered teenagers hiding in barns and creeks. This is real life with vendor emails and seating charts and deciding on flowers. But it's better because we're building it together as adults who survived hell. May helps me pick out decorations while Esther coordinates food with the other Rebeccas, everyone contributing something to make the day special. Jerome practices his efficient speech in his living room, while I sit on his couch crying happy tears, and Bobby paints a piece specifically for the ceremony that shows 2 figures walking toward light. We're creating something genuine and earned instead of fantasy, and that makes every small decision feel important. Beyond 7 grows from Esther's initial idea into a full organization with office space and staff over the next year. 3 of the Rebeccas work there full-time, including Esther, who runs the whole operation, helping hundreds of survivors escape religious abuse and trafficking situations. I volunteer there twice a week between classes, answering calls and connecting people with resources we never had when we needed them most. We create pamphlets about warning signs and escape planning, host support groups for survivors processing identity trauma, and maintain a database of safe houses across multiple states. The work is hard and sometimes triggering when someone's story mirrors our own too closely, but it feels right to turn our experience into something that helps others. Bobby donates several paintings for fundraising auctions, and Jerome sits on the board of directors using his FBI connections to secure grants and partnerships. We're building the support system we wish existed when we were scared teenagers with nowhere to turn, making sure other people don't have to fight alone like we did. Every person we help feels like proof that we're more than the victim someone tried to create, that we chose to become something better. On our wedding day, I stand in Jerome's bathroom adjusting my dress for the 10th time while May fixes my hair. Through the window, I can see Bobby talking to Esther and the other Rebeccas in the backyard, all of them wearing different colors but somehow looking like family. Jerome knocks on the door to ask if I'm ready, and my hands shake as I smooth down the fabric one more time. We walk outside together and everyone turns to watch, but I only see Bobby standing under the flower arch we built yesterday. Jerome starts talking about love and survival and choosing family, and I hold Bobby's hands while tears run down both our faces. When he asks if I take her as my wife, I say yes. So loud everyone laughs, and then Bobby's saying yes too, and we're kissing while our found family cheers. I look around at Jerome crying happy tears and all the Rebeccas who survived with us, and I realize that being created as Rebecca 7 was supposed to make me a victim forever. Instead, it gave me a purpose and a family I chose myself, people who understand exactly what we survived and love us anyway. Bobby and I start our married life knowing we made it through the worst and came out stronger, ready to build something beautiful from the ashes of our manufactured past. The future we're creating isn't the fairy tale we imagined as teenagers, but it's real and it's ours, and that makes it worth every horrible thing we endured to get here.